Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach. With NFL training camps starting up, I just wanted to sit down and go over questions that I have for each NFL team going into the 2026 season. Um, Last week I did all the AFC teams, so now I'm going to go through all of the NFC teams. So I'm going to kick it off with the NFC North, and the first team is the Chicago Bears. Biggest question for the Chicago Bears is, can their offense build off of what it did last year and kind of sustain what it was doing offensively this year, going into their second year with Ben Johnson? So they still have, a lot of the pieces. They got Caleb Williams, going into his third year in the league, second year under Ben Johnson, looking to be the first Bears quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards in a season. They've got still tremendous talent around him. They've got Roma Dunze going into his third year. So they've got two exciting young guys that were rookies last year going into their second year, wide receiver Luther Burden and tight end Colston Loveland. They do still have two very good running backs in DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. They've been also building up their offensive line the past few years. So it's a question of, can they sustain that? They were top 10 offense last season. Their first year under Ben Johnson, who's one of the better offensive minds in the league. So can they kind of build off of that and maybe even improve from what they were doing last year, and maybe see if they can get Caleb Williams to be the first quarterback in the history of the Chicago Bears to throw for 4,000 yards in a season? I think they definitely have all of the pieces there, but we'll wait and see. Next team, Detroit Lions. My question for them is, was last year a fluke? Can they get a bounce back year? So last year they had a bit of a down year, especially compared to the two seasons before that, where they were, top teams in the NFC. And then last year they were fourth in their division, although they did go 9-8. Every team in their division had a winning record. It was their first year without Ben Johnson as offensive coordinator and Aaron Glenn as defensive coordinator. So another year without them. Has Campbell done enough to, as their head coach, done enough to kind of build what they have? Offensively, they've still got a ton of pieces there. They did lose David Montgomery in free agency, but now that gives Jahmyr Gibbs kind of a shot to show what he can do as the true number one back in this system. They still got, very good offensive linemen. They still have some good pieces on defense, especially with Aiden Hutchinson on another year removed from suffering an ankle injury 2 years ago. So, are they going to be able to put all the pieces together this season and have a bounce back year and kind of show that last year was a fluke for them and they're going to, be able to remain a dominant team in the NFC? The next team is the Green Bay Packers. My questions for them pertain to their two players that suffered season-ending injuries last season, and Tucker Kraft and Micah Parsons, both of them tore their ACLs last season. Tucker Kraft was right around week 8 or week 9 in that time frame, and then Micah Parsons was on the later end of the season. So the question for them is, A, how are they going to look coming back from their injuries? Tucker Kraft, there's been some reports that he could be ready to go week 1, or possibly could end up on the PUP list to start the season. For Micah Parsons, I've been a little bit less optimism towards his ability to be 100% by week 1. And then, if they're not ready to go week 1, what does the team look like? So, without Tucker Kraft, they still got Luke Musgrave, a very good tight end. They still got some pretty good wide receivers, and Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, and Matthew Golden going into his second year in the league. So they're still pretty good offensively if Tucker Kraft takes a little bit longer to recover. The main question does come on defense. If Micah Parsons is a little bit slower to recover, he's not ready till later in the season, or maybe even after the first month of the season he doesn't play. There are some pretty big questions on defense for who will step up as their leading pass rusher, because Rashawn Gary is gone, who was their second leading sack, who was number 2 on their team in sacks last year behind Micah Parsons. They did draft Danny Dennis Sutton and this past April in the NFL draft, a guy of Penn State that I'm a big fan of. Maybe they have, Lucas Van Ness can finally step up and get a bigger role in this defense than he's had the past few years. He's kind of been kind of a rotational guy, but hasn't really put up a bunch of big numbers during his time in Green Bay. So there's a question of, who really steps up and, who can be a difference maker for the Packers while Tucker Kraft and Micah Parsons recover from their injuries. Now, the final team for the NFC North is the Minnesota Vikings. And my biggest question for them is, who's going to be their starting quarterback? They have J.J. McCarthy, who is going into his 3rd year in the league. Started last season for them, suffered an injury, didn't really play too well before that injury. Didn't really play great at all throughout the season. Kind of showed little bits, but was never really showed enough to stand out as the guy. That's why they brought in Kyler Murray in free agency this year to really compete for that starting quarterback job. He looked pretty good in minicamp. Let's see how training camp goes, and then see which one of them will be the better choice for this offense, which is a very talented offense, but that has a big question mark at the quarterback position. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. See if J.J. McCarthy can finally prove to be the guy that they really hoped he would be when they picked him in the top 10 of the NFL draft back in 2024, or does Kyler Murray come in and they get him out of Arizona, they get him in a great Kevin O'Connell system, and he actually lives up to the talent-wise, the promise or the expectations that he had as a number 1 overall pick back in 2019 that got sent to not a great situation in Arizona. So wait to see who can emerge as the guy for them at quarterback. Now, moving on to the NFC East, starting off with the Dallas Cowboys. My biggest question for them, kind of similar to the Cincinnati Bengals, is, have they done enough on defense to help their offense win games? So obviously Dallas has a tremendous offense. They were a very good offense last season, but were giving up a bunch of points and losing, really high scoring games. A lot of that was due to they had a lot of injuries in the secondary. Guys in the secondary had down years. Well, they brought in the best, defensive back prospect in this year's draft in Caleb Downs. So, hopefully his addition can really help that secondary. They also brought in some defensive line help, both in free agency and the draft. They brought in Rashawn Gary from the Green Bay Packers. They also drafted Malachi Lawrence out of UCF in the 1st round of the draft. So they added some key pieces on their defense. So let's see if that is enough to, complement this fantastic, very high scoring offense they have. Now, moving on to the New York Giants. My big question for them actually pertains to their, young 2nd-year players in Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterby. For Jackson Dart, it's, can he have, a 2nd-year breakout? Can he, build off of what he was building as a rookie and kind of help lead this team more into the future and try to push, this team for a few more wins than they had last season? And then for Cam Scatterby, it's, can he stay healthy? He got banged up a little bit last season, and then he, it was a fibula injury. He suffered a gruesome injury midway through the season. Was out for the rest of the year, has been recovering. He looks ready to go to start the year. But, you just don't know what'll happen when, he goes to plant that leg in a game or goes to, make a move on it in a real situation and see how it holds up. My questions for them is, Cam Scatterby, can he stay healthy this year? And Jackson Dart, can he, build off of what he was doing last season Can he stay healthy with his playing style? He's a very mobile quarterback that takes a lot of hits, or maybe change up his playing style to take less hits, but continue to improve as a quarterback. Now, moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, my question for them is, what is their offense going to look like this season? Obviously, they don't have A.J. Brown anymore. They sent him to the New England Patriots. They still have Devontae Smith. They drafted Mekhi Lemon in the first round of this year's draft. They still have Saquon Barkley, one of the better running backs in the NFL. Can Jalen Hurts, even with losing their number one receiver, go out and prove that he is a top-tier NFL quarterback? They should have a fully healthy offensive line this season. They did have Lane Johnson, their starting right tackle, got injured last year. So, he'll be coming back, and hopefully that'll help boost their offense. But what does this offense look like? Are they going to be a more run-heavy offense like they were a couple of years ago? Are they going to trust Jalen Hurts to be a bit more of a passer? Are they going to be a little bit more balanced this year? Does Devontae Smith stand up and go out and be a true number one wide receiver, something that he hasn't really had to be during his time in Philly, except for early in his career, I think mainly his rookie season. So, does Saquon Barkley get back into more so close to what he was when he was, a 2,000-yard rusher and Offensive Player of the Year a couple of years ago? Those are the questions that I have for Philadelphia. What can their offense do this year? And finally, final team in the NFC East, the Washington Commanders. My question pertained to quarterback Jaden Daniels. Can he get back to his rookie form? Can he get back to playing how he was as a rookie, where he was offensive rookie of the year and was helping to lead this Commanders team all the way to the NFC Championship game? Last year he got banged up, he suffered a couple of injuries, missed a handful of games, just overall had a down year. So if he can stay healthy this season, can he get to more of the shape that he was, get into more of the type of player that he was, and putting up the type of numbers that he was as a rookie, and helping this team, push for this division, push for the playoffs, try to make a run? Or does he get injured and the team collapses again? So really, can he get back to form to what he was as a rookie? And moving on to the NFC South, I'm going to start with the Atlanta Falcons. My questions for the Atlanta Falcons: who will be their quarterback? Obviously, they have Michael Penix there. He suffered an injury last season, so we couldn't finish out the year. In free agency, they brought in Tua Tagovailoa, who had been released from the Dolphins, but he's somebody that has a history of injuries as well. Both of them have shown flashes of what they can do when healthy. Tua a little bit more than Penix, as Tua, back in 2023 was in the running for NFL MVP, and then 2024 and 2025 kind of suffered a little bit. Mainly 2024 suffered a lot of concussion issues and never really bounced back as a player. Michael Penix is somebody that you don't know if he can play a full season healthy. He hasn't played a full season. He played a full season of healthy football his senior year at Washington, but other than that, he missed multiple years of his college career due to season-ending injuries. He suffered 4 season-ending injuries in 6 years of college. So he's somebody that you don't really know how long he can stay healthy for. So it's gonna be interesting to see how this QB battle develops, and who Kevin Stefanski, the head coach of the Falcons, really trusts to lead this team. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers, my question for Carolina: can they stay on top of this division? Obviously, coming off of winning this division last season, however, they kind of fell backwards into winning the division. They had a losing record, but due to tiebreakers, were above the Buccaneers. But they also went out and they very much improved, especially their defense this offseason. They added Jalen Phillips, a very talented pass rusher from the Dolphins. They added linebacker Devin Lloyd from Jacksonville, is one of the better off-ball linebackers in the NFL. They went and upgraded their offensive line with signing Rasheed Walker. So this team looks, committed to improving some of their weaker aspects from last season. I think if Bryce Young can take another, leap and really develop more in this offense, they have talent around him. They've, kept bringing in pieces on defense to improve this defense. So they're definitely building their team to try and stay atop the division. But we got to wait and see if that will actually come to fruition and they can manage to win this division yet again. Next up is the New Orleans Saints. My biggest question for the New Orleans Saints is, can their second-year quarterback Tyler Shuck have more of a breakout season, building off of what he did as a rookie? Obviously, they've got Kellen Moore, who's a very good offensive-minded coach. So can, another year, another offseason in this Kellen Moore system, can Tyler Shuck really start to develop even more? They brought in Jordan Tyson in the draft, a very talented wide receiver prospect out of Arizona State. Obviously, another year with Chris Olave, where they can build more, or Shuck and Olave can build more of a relationship. They brought in Travis Etienne Jr. from Jacksonville, is a very talented running back. He's good at catching balls out of the backfield. So if Alvin Kamara is a great pass rusher in his own right, great pass catcher in his own right. So can Tyler Shuck continue to improve and continue to build what this Saints team was doing at the end of last season? And can they, maybe push the Carolina Panthers to try and win this division? And next up, the final team in the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. My biggest question for them, kind of similar to the Lions, is, they had a down year last year. Was that a fluke, or is that what's going to continue as, teams around them in their division continue to improve? Last season, obviously, they went 8-9, missed out on the playoffs. The wheels really fell off for them at the back half of the season. Really, Baker Mayfield was playing a lot of last season with a bunch of injuries. He was playing all banged up. But this team as a whole really fell apart at the back end of the season. So can they, is this season going to be more of that, in which they don't stay consistent and, they aren't actually, on par with the rest of their division, which is improving? Or was last year, a fluke, because they've been, the team to beat in this division up until last year? They had won the division every year since 2021. And in 2020, even though they didn't win their division, they knocked the division winners out of the playoffs and went on to win the Super Bowl. So this is a team that has been playing very well for the past 5 years. And then last season, they started off hot and then collapsed the back end of the season. So is that something that's going to happen again? Or can they build with the talent that they have? Baker Mayfield coming in healthy, hopefully staying healthy throughout the season. Their second-year receiver, Emeka Egbuka, he also suffered an injury last season and then wasn't really the same after coming back. Can he stay healthy? Chris Godwin, another more time removed off of his devastating ankle injury from the 2024 season. Can he, look good and more healthy? So can this team, prove that last season was a fluke? They just had a bunch of injuries that they were playing through, and have a bounce back year and try to reclaim the NFC South crown. Now, moving on to the NFC West. First off is the Arizona Cardinals. My question for the Cardinals, can they survive the season? So the Cardinals are, in arguably the toughest division in all of football, and they are a team that is not great right now. They are going into this year looking like Jacoby Brissett is going to be their starting quarterback. They have questions on defense. They used a first-round draft pick, their top 3 pick, on a running back, which was definitely not a position that they needed, as they had a good amount of running backs on their roster. They brought in Tyler Algier in free agency. They still have James Conner there. They still have Trey Benson there. So they really just brought in a 4th running back that, yes, very as talented as he is, was not something that is going to improve their team right away. And then they have 3 teams in their division that made the playoffs last year. 2 teams in the Rams and the Seahawks that were in the conference championship game, and the Seahawks are the Super Bowl winners. So they have the Super Bowl, the team that won the Super Bowl and the Seahawks last season in the division. They have the Rams, who are the favorite to win the Super Bowl this season, in their division. And then they have the 49ers, who are always a very good team, also in their division. And they have not done much to really improve themselves as a team. So, can they just survive the season? Can they do enough to, give their fans hope, whether that's, they play so poorly that, they get Arch Manning and that helps out their team in the future, or, maybe Love can, put up a very good season as a rookie and prove like, hey, this wasn't a wasted pick. But, just can they do anything to give their team hope and survive this season? Next up, the LA Rams. My biggest question for the Rams: can they win the Super Bowl? So they are right now the favorites to win the Super Bowl. They've made it all the way to the NFC title game last season, fell short against Seattle, but they're bringing back Matthew Stafford, who was the NFL MVP last year. Obviously, still have Puka Nacua, one of the best receivers in the NFL. Devontae Adams, who, although is older, is still a very good goal line, red zone receiver. Have a very good running back tandem in Kyle Williams and Blake Corum. They brought in Myles Garrett in the offseason. They traded for the best pass rusher currently in the NFL and added him to a defense, which is already one of the better defensive units in the NFL. They added Watson and McDuffie from the Chiefs, the two corners from the Chiefs that addressed their biggest weakness on defense last season. And there's a possibility that Aaron Donald can come out of retirement to play one more season on the Rams, and you could have Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett on the same defensive line. So they are building the best team, on paper, the best team imaginable. That, if you look at it on paper, you really have to wonder, how do you stop this team? So the Rams look like they are a team that is, their aspirations, as all teams, is obviously to win the Super Bowl, but they are building a team that looks like that is a legitimate Super Bowl or bust team. So my question for them is, can they go out and actually do it? Next up, the San Francisco 49ers. My biggest question for them: can they stay healthy? This is a team that has, suffered a bunch of injuries. They've lost a bunch of guys due to injury. Recently, last season, Christian McCaffrey managed to stay healthy, but the year before that, Christian McCaffrey suffered, missed the big part of the start of the season with an injury. Came back from that injury, immediately got injured again. But so last season they had Nick Bosa, their best defensive lineman, got injured. Fred Warner, one of their best linebackers, missed time due to injury. They had offensive linemen missed time with injury. George Kittle suffered an injury during the season. He's actually out injured once again. He tore his Achilles in their playoff game. Brock Purdy missed some time due to an injury, so Mac Jones had to play some time for them. They brought in Mike Evans in the offseason, who has his own injury concerns. So can he stay healthy on this team that is not known for staying healthy? So really, can the 49ers just stay healthy? I think if they are able to stay healthy, they are one of the better teams in all of the NFL and can, compete against any team in their division. But, can they make it through the season without a bunch of key players getting injured? Now, finally, the Seattle Seahawks. My biggest question for the Seahawks is, can they avoid a Super Bowl hangover? They're coming off of being Super Bowl champions. They are the best team in the NFL right now, or from this past season. But they lost a good amount of pieces in the offseason. They lost their starting running back and Super Bowl MVP, Kenneth Walker. He's now on the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost safety Kobe Bryant. He's no longer on the team. They lost Tariq Woolen, one of their starting corners. He's now with the Eagles. They lost Boye Mafe, who's now on the Cincinnati Bengals. So they've lost, a bunch of players. Oh, they lost their offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak. He's now the head coach of the Raiders. So with all that they have lost, what can they build and what can they sustain to avoid a Super Bowl hangover? Yes, they still have very talented players. They still have Jackson Smith and Jigba as a very good wide receiver. They obviously still have Sam Darnold as their starting quarterback. They drafted Jadarian Price, the second best running back in this draft class in the first round, who can really hopefully fill that Kenneth Walker role, and then hopefully Zach Charbonnet can recover from his knee injury and play a pivotal role late in the season. They do still have some good defensive pieces, although their starting safety, Nick Emanwari, who suffered an ankle injury before the Super Bowl but played through it, has been placed on the PUP list, so he might start the season. Not available for them. So can they do enough, or what can they do to keep this team from suffering a Super Bowl hangover? So those are the questions that I have for each NFC team. Let me know in the comments for any questions that you have that maybe I didn't think of. I'm just super excited for the NFL. We are, we're only a couple weeks away from the preseason starting up. We have training camp. Currently, some teams have started, and some teams are, starting soon. So, let me know in the comments just how excited you are for football season. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, see you.